thought, well, why don't you sell one of your palaces?
Yeah.
I'm sure he lives in a fucking 25-bedroom fucking palace.
Yeah.
Why don't you give some rooms to some of the homeless? Why don't you sell some of your palaces to raise some money to fucking end homeless? Because I'm still not over the fact that Prince Charles threw a £250 million party for himself when he had a crown put on his fucking nut, and there's old ladies dying.
You know that feeling when an article accidentally says the quiet part out loud? Yeah, this is one of those. Peter Hunt, a former BBC royal correspondent, not some trash rag like the Daily Fail or the Scum, just published a piece that quietly confirms what a lot of people have clocked for years. Prince William doesn't deal with the media. He manages it. He controls it. This article lays out how access is currency. Cooperate and you stay inside the bubble. Ask uncomfortable questions and you disappear. Reporters understand the rules. Editors understand the rules. So the coverage stays light, flattering, and carefully incurious. The UK gets endless filler content. Beards, bracelets, beach volleyball clips. Meanwhile, the serious issues barely surface. Royal finances. The Duchy of Cornwall generates tens of millions annually. Public money, property deals, all of it treated like it's swept under the rug. The piece also highlights how this protection bleeds into the Harry narrative. William gets framed as restrained and wounded. Harry gets positioned as disruptive and at fault. The Waleses are glorified, while the Sussexes are villainized. Anonymous sources do the talking. Context goes missing. Accountability never shows up. And then the article becomes a character exposure. William comes off as controlling, calculating, and deeply invested in self-preservation. He appears to be willing to manipulate access, suppress scrutiny, and allow misleading narratives to circulate if it protects his image. This reads as someone who values power and insulation over honesty. This is entitlement operating under the cover of tradition. The bigger problem is structural. This is an unelected future monarch moving closer to the throne without meaningful examination. When the media treats power like a lifestyle brand, the public loses the ability to ask real questions. The article doesn't dramatize any of this. It doesn't need to. It just documents the pattern and leaves it sitting there. And that should make everyone uncomfortable. UK, you're in trouble, girl.
Now, I doubt very much that this will make national news, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because this is perfect. It's literally puts a finger on the pulse of how many people in the UK are feeling about the royal family. And it came from an unlikely source. And this is exactly why the papers might not touch it, because if I were members of that family, I'd be worried. So there's a guy called Danny Dyer, and Danny Dyer he's an actor in the UK, quite a respected actor, but he's known for playing East End type characters, Cockneys and Mockneys or whatever, I feel sometimes he does exaggerate his Cockney background a bit, but he's a very well-known actor. He acted in a soap called EastEnders, and EastEnders is a bit gritty, but to be fair, if you look at the shenanigans of the royal family, and EastEnders is like the poor version of what the royal family do. But EastEnders, I used to be a regular watcher of EastEnders, especially when they had characters like Doc Cotton and Nick, and there was a doctor in it. It was gritty for its time, and it tackled a lot of subjects that were almost taboo in those days. But anyway, it's still ongoing right now, and it's still as interesting, but I stopped watching, maybe 20 years ago or thereabouts. But anyway, why am I saying all this? Well, Danny Dyer, he played a character in EastEnders, and he's a popular TV show host, and he has a podcast with his daughter. And he literally said on his podcast, and honestly, I couldn't believe my ears, he said that the other brother, right, he literally went after the other brother in particular. He mentioned him by name, and he mocked the idea of a man living in a 25-bedroom palace while people are sleeping rough on British streets. He asked why the other brother doesn't open some of the rooms to the homeless, as in the rooms in the palaces. Why don't you open them up to the homeless? And why the family doesn't sell off a property or two to help fund an actual end to homelessness, rather than a documentary about wanting to end homelessness. For me, this is a canary in the coal mine. This is a canary in the coal mine, because he is saying what many people feel. The thing about the Brits sometimes is that we will feel something, but we seethe about it. We keep it inside. We don't say a word. But come election day, come to find out that many people are very resentful of that family. I keep saying that these politicians and royal families and institutions, they keep underestimating how angry and tired and frustrated many British people are. And many people are frustrated because right now bills are astronomical. I was telling somebody the other day, a friend of mine, I was saying to her that my heating bills, for example, they have quadrupled. Yes, fourfold. Things I used to get in supermarket, even food costs. I mean, today I went to get something from the supermarket and they've added more money to it. I was like, but hang on, I just bought, and then I looked at my receipt from last week, and within a week, again, the cost has risen. So this is what we are facing on a daily basis, and it's ongoing for many people, with many people now living below the poverty line, and many children in particular living below the poverty line. And there's an increase in homelessness, antisocial behavior, drinking. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And yet we have somebody witter on about wanting to end homelessness, and then we have the press writing stupid, inane, useless articles about somebody walking in high heels across a lawn. And they honestly think that is what the British people want to hear or want. Anyway, I think this particular voice, as in Danny Dyer's voice, it cuts differently than the usual royal commentary cycle. Because Danny Dyer is certainly not a palace insider trading in anonymous sources and understanding framing. He is not offering a measured take that has been filtered through a royal correspondent's carefully diplomatic language. In fact, Danny Dyer swore a lot. He literally, he even said, there was a phrase he even said that even the king threw himself a 250 million hat party while old ladies are homeless. Yes, he said that. He literally said that. Now, for many people who don't understand why this is significant, and I'm talking about from days of yore, from years and years ago, I know that many EastEnders used to hold the royal family in high regard. In fact, they revered the royal family and looked up to them as special people. Come to find out, they are not that special. And for Danny Dyer, who many see as kind of a hero of, the East End, the Cockney, etc., to be saying this. So, like I said, he's a working class actor from East London. And he is publicly known for never softening an opinion for anybody's comfort. So he is saying plainly what a huge number of ordinary people actually think.
Squatties, here's the thing that really caught my attention. This conversation stopped being about one celebrity giving an opinion. Now you've got more and more people asking the same question. And when that happens, you can't just wave it away anymore. See, it's one thing when one person speaks out. People will say, oh, that's just their opinion. Fair enough. But then another person says something similar. Then another. Then another. Before long, you're sitting there thinking, hold on, why are all these different people ending up in the same place? That's when the conversation changes. Danny Dyer didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like someone you'd bump into at your local pub. No fancy language, no polished speech, just straight to the point. He basically asked what a lot of ordinary people have been wondering. If homelessness is one of the biggest issues in Britain, where are the visible results? That's not a complicated question. It's actually a very simple one. And simple questions are usually the hardest to answer, because regular people don't live inside press releases. They live in the real world. They walk past rough sleepers. They see families struggling. They watch the cost of living climb every year. So when they hear another speech about solving homelessness, they're naturally going to look around and ask, okay, what's changed? That's human nature. Here's what makes this interesting. The criticism isn't coming from one political party or one newspaper. It's coming from different corners, different voices, different backgrounds. Yet somehow the question stays the same. That's not something you ignore. And let's be honest, the palace has always relied on polished images, nice photographs, big speeches, perfectly planned visits, everything carefully staged. But we're living in a different era now. People don't just clap because somebody showed up wearing a suit. They want receipts. Show me the impact. Show me what actually happened after the cameras packed up and went home. That's where the pressure starts, because speeches are easy. Results are where the real work begins. Imagine your manager at work holding meetings every Monday talking about improving the office. Every week there's another presentation, another premise, another speech. Then 6 months later, the roof is still leaking, the computers still don't work, the coffee machine is still broken. Eventually, somebody in the back is going to raise their hand and ask, so when do we actually fix something? That's exactly how public accountability works. And here's what I find fascinating. Years ago, questioning royal projects like this almost fell off limits. People would whisper. Now they're saying it out loud. That's a huge change. The public isn't impressed by titles alone anymore. People want substance. They want proof. Being Prince William might get you attention. It doesn't automatically protect you from criticism. If anything, it brings even more scrutiny. Because when you choose to make homelessness your signature cause, people naturally expect to see something they can point to. Not just another headline, not just another carefully worded statement. Something real, something that changes lives. And that's why this conversation isn't fading away. It's growing. Because once ordinary people start asking hard questions, more ordinary people feel comfortable asking them too. That's how momentum works. One voice becomes 5, 5 becomes 50. Then suddenly it's not a few critics talking anymore. It's the public looking at one of the country's biggest institutions and saying, all right then, we've heard the speeches. Now show us the results. Here's what I don't understand. If you're going to make homelessness your flagship mission, then people are naturally going to expect flagship results. That's not being unfair. That's just common sense. The bigger the promise, the brighter the spotlight. That's how life works. Imagine opening the biggest restaurant in town with a giant sign that says, best food in Britain. People aren't walking in to admire the menu. They're coming to taste the food. If the plates keep coming out empty, nobody's going to keep clapping because the sign looked nice. That's the situation here. For years we've heard speeches, we've seen launches, we've watched carefully planned visits, we've listened to big ambitions. But ordinary people are asking a very ordinary question. What has actually changed? Not on paper, not in a presentation, out there on the streets. Because homelessness isn't an abstract discussion. It's real people, people sleeping in doorways, families squeezed into temporary accommodation, young people wondering where they're going to sleep next week, veterans who serve their country but still can't find a permanent place to call home. That's the reality, and reality doesn't care how polished a speech sounds. Here's what makes me laugh. Sometimes it feels like we're expected to celebrate announcements before seeing outcomes. Hold on, shouldn't it be the other way around? Imagine your boss promising everyone a pay rise. Months go by, nothing changes. Then the company calls another meeting to remind everyone how exciting the pay rise idea is. Eventually, somebody's going to stand up and say, so where's the money? That's not negativity, that's accountability. The same applies here. People aren't asking for another glossy brochure. They're asking whether lives are actually improving. There's a big difference. Now, don't get me wrong. You can hold meetings, you can build partnerships, you can organize conferences, fine. But none of those things automatically put a roof over someone's head tonight. That's the question people keep coming back to. And every time they don't get a clear answer, the questions get louder. Because here's something regular people understand. Results speak. Everything else is just noise. Think about your own life. If you tell your family you're going to renovate the house, 5 years later, they're not asking how many planning meetings you attended. They're looking at the walls. Did you fix the roof? Did you paint the rooms? Did anything actually happen? It's the same principle. What surprises me is that some people seem shocked whenever Prince William's campaign gets questioned. Why? When you choose to put yourself at the center of one of Britain's biggest social problems, scrutiny comes with the job. Nobody forced him to make homelessness his signature issue. That was the choice. And once you make that choice, people are going to keep score. That's just reality. The bigger the promise, the tougher the questions, the louder the expectations. And honestly, I think that's healthy, because public campaigns shouldn't be judged by how many headlines they generate. They should be judged by whether people's lives are actually changing. At the end of the day, someone sleeping rough doesn't need another announcement. They need a front door. They need a key. They need a place to sleep safely. That's the finish line people care about, not the speech, not the photo opportunity, the result.
Now this is where I really start scratching my head. Because every time this conversation comes up, I keep hearing the same words. Technology, data, artificial intelligence, early intervention, dashboards, analytics. Okay, all of that sounds impressive. But let me ask a very simple question. Can an app build a house? No. Can a spreadsheet lower somebody's rent? No. Can artificial intelligence hand a homeless family the keys to a safe place tonight? No. See, that's where ordinary people start checking out. Not because they hate technology, far from it. Technology is great. It helps businesses, it helps hospitals, it helps schools. Nobody's arguing with that. But when somebody is sleeping in their car, the last thing they're thinking is, I really hope someone creates a better algorithm. They're thinking, I need somewhere to sleep tonight. That's real life. Sometimes I feel like these conversations are happening in two completely different worlds. One world is full of presentations, fancy buzzwords, and polished speeches. The other world is somebody trying to stay warm under a bridge. Those two worlds don't feel very connected, and that's the problem. Imagine calling a plumber because your kitchen is flooded. The plumber walks in carrying a laptop. He gives you a 30-minute PowerPoint about water, shows you graphs, pulls up statistics, explains the history of pipes. Meanwhile, your living room is turning into a swimming pool. At some point, you're going to interrupt him and say, mate, can you fix the leak first? That's exactly how this debate feels. Nobody is saying information is useless. Of course it's useful. Knowing who's at risk can help charities and local services respond earlier. That's common sense. But identifying a problem isn't the same thing as solving it. There's a huge difference. If I tell you I'm hungry, you've identified the problem. Congratulations. Now where's the sandwich? See what I mean? Regular people tend to think like that. They're practical. They don't live in boardrooms. They live in neighborhoods where rent keeps rising, where young families struggle to buy their first home, where people work full-time and still worry about housing costs. So when they hear another speech about innovation, they naturally ask, that's nice, but where are the actual homes? That's not a complicated question. It's probably the most obvious question anyone could ask. And here's another thing. Sometimes I think we fall in love with complicated solutions because they sound clever. But the people living through homelessness aren't asking for clever. They're asking for shelter. They're asking for stability. They're asking for a key that fits a front door. That's it. No fancy presentation required. And here's the irony. The more complicated the language becomes, the simpler the public's questions become. Did more people get housed? Are fewer people sleeping rough? Can families find affordable places to live? Those are the questions that matter. Everything else is background music. At the end of the day, ordinary people judge success the same way they always have. Not by how impressive the plan sounded, by whether life actually got better. Because somebody trying to survive another night on the street doesn't need a smarter computer. They need a roof. They need 4 walls, and they need a door they can lock behind them. Until people see more of that, don't be surprised if they keep asking hard questions. Because when real life meets big promises, reality usually wins every single time.
Let's end with this. I think something has changed. Not just with Prince William, not just with the royal family, with the public. People aren't impressed by speeches the way they used to be. Years ago, someone could stand behind a podium, deliver a polished speech, smile for the cameras, shake a few hands, and most people would say, well done. These days, not so fast. Now people are asking, okay, what happened after the cameras left? That's the difference. The public has become tougher. And honestly, I don't blame them. Life is expensive. People are working harder than ever.
Bills don't wait, rent doesn't wait, the supermarket definitely doesn't wait. So when someone steps forward claiming they're tackling one of the country's biggest problems, people naturally expect to see something they can actually point to. Not another promise, not another glossy video, something real. Imagine your friend telling you every month, "I'm starting the gym on Monday," every single Monday, for 3 years. Eventually, you're going to stop listening. Not because you hate your friend, but because you've heard the speech already. Now you want to see the before and after picture. That's where a lot of people are right now. They're tired of hearing what's going to happen. They want to know what has happened. And that's a completely reasonable question. Here's something else I've noticed. The internet has changed everything. People don't just read one newspaper anymore. They compare stories. They watch full interviews. They read reports. They fact-check. They argue online. They share clips. They dig deeper. The days of accepting every headline without question are fading fast. And that's making life a lot harder for institutions that used to rely on carefully managed public relations. Because once people start asking questions, they usually don't stop at one. They ask another, then another, then another. It's like your little nephew who discovers the word why. Why? Okay, but why? Yeah, but why? Before you know it, everybody in the room is looking for answers. That's the world we're living in now. And here's the thing. This isn't just about the monarchy. Governments face it. Big companies face it, charities face it, celebrities face it. Everybody is being measured by results. Not slogans, not photo opportunities, not perfectly written speeches. Results. Because speeches don't keep a family warm in winter. They don't pay the rent. They don't unlock the front door to a permanent home. Real change does. And that's why I think this conversation is only going to get louder. The public isn't lowering the bar. If anything, they're raising it. They're saying, if you want our trust, earn it. If you make a promise, show us what came from it. That's not being cynical. That's called accountability. At the end of the day, titles don't solve problems. Public relations don't solve problems. Press releases don't solve problems. People want proof. They want to see lives changing. They want to see communities improving. They want to see that all those speeches actually led somewhere. Because in today's world, applause doesn't last very long. Results do. And I have a feeling that's exactly how every future royal campaign is going to be judged. Not by how good it sounded, but by what it actually achieved. All right, squaddies, that's a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching, for hanging out with me, and for bringing the heat in the comments. You guys never disappoint. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and join the family. I'm your host, Miles. Love you all. Stay blessed, stay smiling, and don't let anybody steal your joy. I'll catch you in the next one.